In last week's video, I looked at how to design this sign up form right here with XD, and in this week's video, we're going to be looking at how to code it up. Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Kevin, and here at my channel we learn how to make the web and how to make it look good while we're at it with weekly tips, tricks, and tutorials. If you're here, I'm assuming you saw the last video. Maybe the design side doesn't interest you too much, but now we're going to be coding it up. This is part 2 of my design and code challenge. So as I just mentioned 5 seconds ago, I just designed a sign-up form. We redesigned Steam's sign-up form using Adobe XD, and now you're probably here to watch me code it up. So without further ado, let's go and do that.
So here we are in CodePen while I'll be coding it all up. So the link is in the description below if you want to check it out, if you want to either fork it and play around with it, if you want to double check your code against mine, or whatever it is. You can find all the code for this down below. One important note is I have a screenshot here of the design I did. It's a screenshot from the video I recorded because I actually lost the design files. My son came on my computer afterwards and closed a whole bunch of stuff because he said there was too much stuff opened. And sadly, that was one of the things that was opened and I hadn't saved it. Usually XD will save the last thing you were working on, like you open it and it just opens as like an on-save file that here you go, you can keep working from there, but in this case it didn't. So that's fine, we'll do our best just based on this screenshot. And I think we're ready to go in. So I've already gone and I dropped a whole bunch of colors here and got a whole bunch of stuff off screen just to make that go a lot faster. So that should make our lives a little bit quicker there at least. So let's start off. I'm going to obviously doing some HTML first, so I'm going to sort of shrink this away because there won't be too much to look at right now. I like having this in front while I'm writing my markup, and then when I'm doing the CSS, we'll make that bigger so we can actually see what we're doing. So yeah, let's get started. The sign up form itself, I just have a little bit of CSS here. It's going to keep everything in the middle of my screen, so it's a little bit like this. And Steam sign up form will just be a nice big div here that will be putting everything in. That's going to hold everything in there. Now, one thing I'm actually going to do on here is let's start with a div called front. And the way I'm doing that is I'm just doing dot and then front and pushing tab. CodePen has Emmet already in there. If you don't know about Emmet, you can check it out, but it is a free sort of extension or plugin or whatever for pretty much any code editor or text editor that is out there, so you can check out Emmet for that. So we have my front, and my front is this part here. Normally I'm using the BEM naming conventions for my class names, and I'll stick to it a little bit, but I'm going to do like a front and a back. Even though this is what we see first, from like an accessibility point of view, you'd want someone seeing this first and this second. So this is my first div in the actual markup, and we'll play around with our CSS to position it the way it is here. So we're going to have a front and a back, like that. What I've actually gone and done is I managed to find the Steam logo in as a vector, so I've made an SVG out of that. So I'm just going to grab that from off screen and plug that in here. So we have my SVG. You can see it right there. It's the Steam logo. And I've put a class of logo on there already just so we can manipulate that a little bit later. It could have been just a PNG, but I found the SVG of it, so I thought that would work out nicely. After that, I'm going to make an H1. So we'll do an H1 of title. So that's create your account. I'm not going to do all the typing and stuff right now, but there we go, create your account. We have a couple of paragraphs, right? So we have 3 paragraphs here. So I'm going to do a P*3 and then hit tab on there, and Emmet will turn that into 3 paragraphs. And this last one here should have a strong tag in it as well. So what I'm going to do is do all the structure for now. So we have my title here, my H1. Then I'll have my 3 paragraphs, and then we're going to come into our form. So I'm not going to put all this text in. I'm going to go through the structure of it, and then we'll fast forward while I put all the text in, because that's a little bit less important to see. And then we'll slow back down when it's time to do the CSS. Great. So with that done, it's time for our form. So I'm just going to do a regular form here, and it's not going to be fully functioning or anything like that. We're just going to have it, we're doing the real front end design of it, not the functionality of it in this case. So we have our form right there, and now we need a few things. So let's actually zoom in on this a little bit so we can take a closer look. So I have my email, I have this little thing here that's going to be like a hover on there, and we'll get a tooltip that pops up. and we have my label that's not my label, my actual input that's here. So we'll start with a label. My label, we'll give it a class. Not sure what I want to call it yet. We'll come back to that in a second. And it's going to be for email. So your email, just because I want to see this to make sure it's working. So we can close that label. And then we're going to do an input class equals, I'm not sure yet either. The type will equal email. And we need an ID on there of email. And we should also put a name on there, and you guessed it, email. So if you're not familiar with forms, what all these are doing, the class will be my class name. The type is for email to make sure that someone's actually putting in an email in there. The ID of email is linking to the label. So this for on the label is going to link to the ID here, which means if someone actually clicks, or more likely on mobile, they push here, they click on the label, it actually activates the field. So if I click here, it's going to go into that field right away. So the for and the ID need to have the same name, and then, or the same value. And then the name here, this is what gets submitted with the actual form. So it's always important that you have one. I could be wrong, but I think when you submit a form, that if something doesn't have a name on it, it won't actually submit the value somebody writes in there. So always make sure you have a name on all your inputs. We can actually just we can repeat that now. So we're going to have a label. For on this one will be my password. My, and we'll just skip that for now because I'll fast forward. So for is for my password, and then my input type in this case will be password. And the reason you want to make sure you have a password is that will actually make it look like a password field there. And you can see I have LastPass installed, so it's wants to fill in my actual username and password right now. Okay, and the last thing we want is a label for, what should we call this one? Password re-enter. Kind of a crappy name, but and the input password, and actually ID equals password re-enter, and name can be, I'm not going to be very original here, we'll just put the same thing there. And same with this, we can copy, actually, take all of this, ID, and name. There we go. What do we need next? What do we need next? Whoops. After those inputs, we have that one, and that one. Oh, I forgot that. We'll come back when we do the tooltips, because I'm not actually, I was thinking of having them as pseudo-elements, but we want to be able to hover on them. And if they're pseudo-elements, when you hover, I'd want a pseudo-element coming up. So we can't have a pseudo-element and a pseudo-element. So I'm going to think about that while we keep going through the rest of this. So we need our two things down here. So what I think I'm going to do is a paragraph, except my paragraph is going to get a class fine print. So basically the font size on a few of these things is a lot smaller. So I'm going to have a fine print class on there that can make things a lot smaller. And in here we can have another input. This input will be a checkbox. There we go. So that gives me my checkbox. And then I can have a label. Label. So here we can do that checkbox is name and ID, which I want on here as well. The ID will be agree. We'll do agreement. An agreement for agreement. On this I put 2. I did the I agree and I'm 13 years old because I stole that from the original one, and then I said I read and agree. I think we're going to merge that into just one big line saying like I am 13 years of age or older and agree to the, and then we can do a link, terms and services, close A, and put a period. I think that makes a little bit more sense than having the two of them. Now, in the real world, we'd have the reCAPTCHA form here. I've had a few people mention that they don't like reCAPTCHA. I wanted to make it realistic, and the Steam did have one, but it was the type I don't like. Apparently, some people have trouble with these ones. reCAPTCHA is working on a version 3. It's in beta now, where you would be completely hidden from the user. It's just tracking their behavior while they're on the site, and then when they hit sign up now, as long as they were behaving like a human, it will allow them to submit it. So that could be cool if it works. For the time being, I do think that this is sort of the most realistic situation. So I'm going to do a paragraph to throw this one in as well. But I'm not going to be setting up a reCAPTCHA, so I'm going to do it as an image. And once again, I've just taken that image that I already had, and I've gone and uploaded it. If you have a CodePen Pro account, you can upload stuff onto their as an asset. So I've already done that. So I'm just linking to that. So if you want to play around with this, come and fork this pen, and you'll have access to all the assets that I'm using in here. Well, all the assets. You'll have the SVG, this, and I'll talk a bit about it later. But the fonts I'll be using as well. Okay, cool. So we have our reCAPTCHA, and then we just need our sign up. So that's going to be a button. Sign up now, close button, and we need our link that's going to be after. So that's going to be an href. And actually this one's going to have a class of fine print on here as well, since it is tiny. And close A. Good. So that should be good for that. Here we'll have our text that, again, I'll come back and do that one a little bit after, just to speed things up. The structure of this should work out fine. When I start doing the CSS, I'll probably be coming in here. I'll be adding some class names once I've thought about it a little more, and there might be little things to add. Again, I need to figure out how I'll be doing those. But we'll be doing that on the fly a little bit. So we have my front. Now we want to come over here to the back. That's there we go, zoom back. Can I not stay zoomed in? There we go. So on here I'm gonna have an H2, we'll call it subheading, I guess. And so that would be Y join Steam. And so we have Y join Steam, and then we'll have this as a list. So it'd be a UL. This should probably have a class on it of, realistically, I'd probably do like list and list on styled or something like that. So this would be my main styles of my list. And then again, this would be pretending it's part of a larger ecosystem. I'd probably be naming it something like that. So we'll do that. And then list items times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. List item times 6. And there we go. We have the 6 list items. They just need to be filled in. So I'm going to hit fast forward on this so you can watch me work through it, but I'm pretty much just going to be copying and pasting text into all these fields, or typing some stuff in as well. So I'll see you on the other side of that. Enjoy the tunes while I work our way here. Alrighty, so I did all my markup, and I sort of skipped ahead here and started doing some CSS, but it was all some boring stuff. So basically, I was just getting here in my root, setting up a whole bunch of CSS variables, or CSS custom properties as they're actually called, that I can reuse when I need to. So I think these are the only font sizes I used, and I'm sort of guessing at this a little bit because, again, I lost my file, but I know this is 18, I know that's 12, and I sort of guessed at those other two because I don't remember what they were. I grabbed my colors here and I set up 2 other ones just because this is what I used for most of this, because I just set that to white with an opacity of 0.8. And these boxes, I think, were in that range like that because I set them as black and then I just lowered their opacity way down. So that's what all this is for. If you don't know about CSS custom properties, I have a short series on it that's probably worth checking out. But I think just through watching this, you'll get an idea of how they work because they're really, really handy and useful. My system for setting them all up here is just my font sizes go in order from smallest to biggest. My colors go from lightest to darkest. And then this number 5 here is actually the green one over here. So I'm going from like from white to my light blue to this blue, my darkest blue. And then, yeah, basically that's, what I've done there, and just this to set the border box stuff up to make my life a little bit easier because I find that's just a lot easier to do in the long run. The next thing I'm going to do is get my fonts set up, and I'm doing this on screen instead of fast forwarding it just because Adobe has recently switched from Typekit, which they've owned for a long time now, to just fonts.adobe or Adobe Fonts. You can see I have a couple tabs here, and the font I chose was Motiva Sans, which I actually think is the Steam font, but that was just by pure luck. But I want to take a quick look at it because it's so easy to use now. And one advantage of how they've set it up now is there's no more limits on stuff. And as long as you're forking my original repo here, you'll have access to these even if you're not a Typekit user. Or at least that's what their FAQ says. So if you don't have an Adobe subscription, if you're forking this, you'll still have full access to the fonts. So if I go and look here, the way it would work is if you are using it, or they do have free. If you have a free account, you do have access to some. Maybe this is in here, but I don't know, to be honest, just because I do have the full suite that I'm paying for. But you can just click Add to Web Project, and it becomes sort of like Google Fonts here. You can select the ones that you want to add to your project. Just check all the ones you need. You used to get like this special way of integrating it. You had to say what addresses you wanted to use it on. All of that is gone now. You just add it to your project so it activates it. Now I've already done that because if I do this, you can see I have a design and code sign up form. So I've already set it all up. So once you've set it up, you get a page like this. So you can see all the different ones I have, and they give you a nice little embed link, or I can click this and I can get the import, which is what I'm going to use for this one. So I'm going to copy that. Come back over here and all the way at the top, just paste that right in there. Actually, I should bring my font weights also into here, so we'll do that in a second, but I'm going to come back just because I believe if I go to edit project, yeah, so I have the light, I have the bold, and I have the black, and here it gives me the font family little thing that I wanted. So I'm just going to copy that. On my body, I can paste that in. We should see it all switch over. And then, so I have the 300, the 700, and the 900. Just like my numbering system here. Might not be the best for font weights, but I'm still going to do it. Font weight 1 would be my 300. My font weight 2 would be my 700 in this case, and my font weight 3 would be my 900. Now this might not be the best system just because if later on the project updates and you need the 3, the 4, the 7, and the 9, you know, you don't want a 1.5, you'd have to change those and then it would ruin stuff, but I know it's an isolated project, so I'm going to do it like this for now. Okay, so I think we're ready to start doing everything we need to do now. We're ready for style-wise, so let's start styling things up a little bit. So the first thing, let's come back down to my body. This, again, is just centering everything on my screen, and I'm going to give this a min height. I don't think we'll go higher than what I have, but just in case. So we need a background color on here, so background color, and this is where I can just do var, and it was color 4 is my darkest one. And just like that, it sets it up. So just putting var, parentheses, and then you write the name of whatever you need from here, and it will use it. So nice and handy. Color, the color for my body will be my var color body. And we'll switch my titles out after to be a little bit brighter. My font size also should be a little bit bigger, so font size was var font size 1. Font weight should already be okay, but I'm still going to do my font weight 1. And my line height definitely needs to be a bit bigger. So line height will go with like a 1.6 is usually my default starting point. It looks pretty good. Might come back and play with that, but I think it'll be okay. Cool. Actually, here I see my strong isn't working because I put strong tags on there. I'm using Firefox, so if you're doing it in Chrome, it might look fine. Firefox's strong tag doesn't default to bold, it defaults to bolder, so it's going from the 300 to the 400 and nothing's actually changed. So just for typography, for now, we'll do strong. Font weight was var font weight 3, because it was the heaviest one I think I used there. It looks pretty bold. There we go, we can see that worked. The spacing's a little big here, so paragraph margin will be 0, 0, and maybe like a 0.25 even. I had them pretty tight together. That looks pretty good. My logo is obviously way too big, so we can also fix that. Logo width. Actually, I'm going to give it a height. I read their style guides when I found it as part of their style guide. Their minimum height for their logo is 50 pixels, so I'm going to stick with their minimum height. I think I randomly got close to that originally anyway. Funnily enough, their style guides say you should use either white or black, but on their main website they're using this gray, so I don't know what the deal is, but I'm going to stick with that. Okay, so I think we can get a bit more interesting now, and I'm going to be using CSS Grid to do the main layout for this, and it's because of the way it's underlapping there. I think the CSS Grid will be the easiest way to do it. So let's do my Steam sign up form, and we'll do a little display grid on here. Then let's set up, I guess we'll just do grid template rows and grid template columns. So for my rows, I need one row for this, one row here, and then a third row there. I don't know what sizes they want, and as the content adjusts, I sort of want them to automatically do it. So I think we could use repeat 3 auto. I think that'll work, and if it doesn't, I'll fix it. But I think I just want them to automatically be calculated, so I think that'll work. And the reason I'm actually explicitly stating it instead of letting it automatically do it is because I want to put things on my grid, and it won't work unless I've explicitly outlined parts of my grid. Or it probably would, but anyway, I'm going to do it like that. For this, I'm going to set one, so I'm going to have a column here, and then a column for this little bit here. So I think what we'll do is something like, I don't know, it's less than 50%. Let's say it's 35%. This will just take up all the leftover space in the middle. And then we need one last thing for that, and I don't know how big that is, 3M. We'll try something like that, and we'll see how it works out, more or less. Except I misspelled this, just like I had originally before, because everything should sort of fall into the wrong... There we go. That's more what I was expecting to happen. So things are automatically falling onto the grid, and we need to fix that a little bit. I'm also going to give this a width, actually, width of like 960 pixels. And I think I always use this view, but I think I'm going to jump over to this view, actually, for this one. It might make it I might go back and forth a little bit, but just so we can actually see the whole form on here. Yeah, we'll do that for now. I realize you can't see a lot of the CSS, so I'm going to sort of jump back and forth, but I want to be able to see as much as I can for the time being. So even if we have to scroll up and down, let's just do it like this for the moment. Okay, so that's looking pretty, or it's not looking so good yet, but I think it's going to work out fine. So let's start placing things on the grid. So I have my front and my back that I want to start styling, and my back. So the first thing I'm going to do is front will be like in order 2. And there we go, they've switched sides. So right away, that's a good start. So I'm pretty much, you know, if I wanted to, I could just to be order 1 just to for sure make sure they're like that. Not necessary, but it sort of, if somebody else were to read the code, it would probably make a little bit more sense. So I've visually switched their order, but from accessibility point of view, if you're using a screen reader, it's going to do this first and do this second because it's following the markup. So doing this is a nice little way of keeping things good and accessible. So for my front, let's just give this a background color. It was var color 3, because yes, and padding. Oh, that's the wrong color. 4. We need some padding on this too. Let's try 3 rem. Two. There we go. That looks better. Okay, and then my back will get a background color of var color 3. Ah, perfect. Awesome. So our colors are starting to work out a little bit. And we can start seeing how these things are falling on the grid, which is great. What I want to do now is I want to say that this is on the grid row of 1/4. Because I want to make sure it's going from the top all the way to the bottom. It's going to screw everything up. Actually, the order might be useless in a second here. Well, it already is, but then this one is going to go from a grid row of, the back would be 2/3. And actually, we're going to start running out of room here, but let me pull this up and turn on my grid so we can see it, and display line numbers so you can see what all this is about. So basically here we can see my line numbers coming up. So column line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, and then my row line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. So what I've done is when I made my grid originally, I said that I wanted 3 rows. So 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows. And so I have my line numbers start at 1, so we end up with 4 lines. So what I'm saying is my front should start at line number 1, which is the top, and go to 4, which is all the way at the bottom. I could also do this as a 1 negative 1. It would be the exact same thing because the line numbers work backwards. So it goes -1, -2, -3, -4 that way. So you can do either one and it would work fine. And then what I'm doing, let's just bring this back so we can get my line numbers back up. So then this one's going from line 2 to line 3, so it's only filling up that space. So that's the deal with the line numbers. Now I also want to make sure that the front, not the front, the back is going to have a grid column, because I want it to start at 1 and go to the end, so over -1. And that should pull it out to the back, except this is probably covering it. So on my front, we want to do a grid column of 2/3. And there we go. It's sticking out. Oh, except no. I don't want my back to do that. So I'm actually going to do a 1/. Because I don't want my text to go behind, obviously. Oh, I have an idea. Okay, we can fix that. So what we're going to do actually here, so what I'm actually going to do is take the background color off of this one too. And we should probably add a little bit of padding on here. Padding of, I don't know, we'll use the same we used before. Yeah, and what I'm going to do is on my back, I'm going to add an after on here. Because the cool thing with pseudo-elements on the grid is they work super well because you can place pseudo-elements on the actual grid. So my after here is going to get a content of nothing, a display block, a background, and now we can put our background on here, color 3, oops. And I want the position absolute, because then we can just do top 0, right 0, bottom 0, left 0. And, oh, my color is not working because I put color. This should be var. Z index of -1 to push it all the way to the back. And now it's actually filling up the whole page. So let's just go all the way up to my Steam signup form and give this a position of relative. So it's not positioning on the document, it's positioning inside of that. And then we need to give this the same thing I gave the other one. So we want to give this a grid row of 2/3. Right now it's not really working out too good, but this is going to get a lot longer because you can see that it's barely working there. Yeah, that's actually one thing that might help that out is if I do an align self center. Is that going to change anything? No. So yeah, as we work on this, I think it's going to help. Also, I have way too much space on the top of this. So when we get to styling that, I think it's going to sort of balance itself out. And if it doesn't, we'll come back and revisit. I'm really not used to working this way, so I'm going to jump back to this way for now just because I think it's easier to see. But as I said, we'll probably bounce back and forth a little bit. Actually, let's fix those titles now anyway, because we're sort of there. My titles, I would normally come up to like here where it's more generic stuff. So title and subheading. I don't know why I didn't do title and subtitle, but I didn't. The color on these ones is color var color 1 because they're pure white. They're not a little bit transparent. They're both all caps, so text transform uppercase. And I did a little bit of letter spacing on them, so letter spacing probably like 1 pixel. Yeah, that looks a little bit better already. I have my list too, so I think I'm going to do my list right away. So it was list. I did it like this on styled. Margin 0, padding 0, list style none. Let's see what that gives us just to begin with. And you can see that it is working out a little bit better now with how that, and as this gets longer, it's going to follow more of what we were after. It's still not perfect, but we're going to get there. I need these list items to, so I'm just going to do a list li. I know nesting isn't always the best thing, but we're going to do it anyway. Margin bottom of like 1em. Breaking onto 2 lines, which makes me think I didn't give it enough space. Anyway, let's keep going and we'll figure it out again. Here for create your account should actually be, that's my title. Oh, I didn't change these font sizes either. So my title, I was going to do the font weight. We'll do font size first. Font size is var font size 3. And the font weight was var font weight 3, and my subtitle or subheading was a font size of var font size 2. There we go. Actually, that makes it fit in all a little bit better. Already happier with how that looks. This I'm also going to give a margin top of 0. There we go, there we go. And here I'm also going to do, no, we're going to leave it like that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good actually. I'm really happy with that. Let's keep going. And so this is all good. Now we got to get into this, which is the sort of the nitty gritty of this one. So one thing I'm going to do, let's come down, front, back, and now everything will be just for our form. So for my form, I didn't give it a class, did I? I'm going to give it the class equals form. as much as possible, I like selecting classes. I know I didn't do it here or for my list items, but say levy. Form, let's give it a bit of margin just to separate it from everything else. Just to help spread things out a little bit, except I'm also going to give it a 0 on the bottom, just so it doesn't create an extra space here where we don't really want it. So it's just going to create like this gap that we get right there. Maybe 2m's too big. We'll see once everything else is styled. So we're going to have to come back into our markup because I didn't give these classes. So for my label would be a form what? Form, let's just call it form label. Nice and easy. And we'll copy that and put it on those two. And my input, which is these things here, we'll give those a class. Class, oh, I already have a class on this first one. Class is equal to form. I'm going to call it text, just because it's a text input. Because I don't want this for my checkbox, so I'm not going to give it the class of like form input, because there's different types of inputs. Sorry that this is refreshing each time like that. It should stop now that I'm going back into the CSS. Yeah, so what I can do with that now is on my form label, we're just going to do a display block on there for now. That's going to just force everything. Nice and easy like that. And then on my form text, we're going to give that one a margin bottom pretty small. We'll try 0.25m and see what happens. This is a little bit too big, eh? We'll do with, whoops, 1.5 on that one. It's funny, I'm in the Firefox developer now, and it's reloading that every time, whereas every other browser I've ever used, it doesn't refresh the whole page, it just sort of updates it, so I'm curious about that. That's pretty much what I was after, really. I have my fine print down there. I'm actually going to bring the fine print back up to here with my title, my subtitle, my paragraphs, and all of that stuff, just because it's sort of my typography stuff. So fine print was the font size of var, font size small. There we go. That's kind of annoying. Well, annoying, like the checkbox, I don't want to make the checkbox itself smaller, but see how the text is lining up at the bottom of the checkbox? I'd much prefer if that was centered. And I want it to have a bit more space around it too, obviously, because it's sort of glued in with everything else here. The idea would be, I don't want to give it something like too specific just for this, do I? 1 second, let me just check something here. Form, in my form, is there a margin bottom on that though? I was going to make this 1. I want to see what happens. Okay, I'm going to maybe go with a 0.5 and we'll see if I can be happy with that or not. Maybe we'll do a 0.75 and just call it. I think we can live with that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And actually, yeah, let's... Okay, so that's looking all right. We want to actually style these up now. So we've got our margins. We might as well just keep working on this. So I'm actually going to come to here and do an onset all. If you don't know what, not onset all, I wish it was that way, all onset. It just strips away everything, but it's even making it like an inline element. It's a complete reset. If you're not sure what this is doing, I just came up with a 5-minute Friday on that, so you can check it out. But it pretty much strips all the styling back to the default, but not the default of the element itself, but just like default. It's a very powerful thing that you might not want to use very often. And browser support for it isn't 100%, but it's not bad. So I think we can do that. What else do we want? We have our margin. We want to give it a background. So this is where I came up with that color dark. Did I call it dark or black? There we go. Perfect. That's looking pretty good. I had a bigger width on it though. Width was probably 100%. Some padding on there. How much padding should I give it? 1M? That's a little bit too big, eh? 0.75. That's pretty much what I had there. I'm actually going to make this a little bit different. I find my spacing is not big enough now. I think what I'm going to do, I want to give it a little bit more space on the top. So I'm going to do like a 0.25, but then a 0 left and right, and maybe we'll bring it back to a 0.75 on the bottom. And of course that's not a margin bottom then, that's just a margin. Just when they got bigger, I felt the need to do that. And actually I'm going to switch this even all the way up to a 1. Whoops, 1. Is that going to be too much? I think we'll go with that. That's looking all right. Cool, so I'm happy with how that looks. Maybe a little bit big. 0.6. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. All right. Yeah, I'm very happy with that actually. So let's keep going. I have my little reCAPTCHA there that I didn't actually do anything with. I'm gonna give this a class of reCAPTCHA. Just so I can actually reCAPTCHA. Give it a bit of spacing on this itself, so the margin can be like 0.25 and 1, maybe the same that we did on the form text there, with a 0 in the middle. Maybe a bit bigger on the top. Good. These links shouldn't be this color, and we still need to style the button there. Yeah, these links, what I'm going to do is, let's just move this over for a second. And you'll notice this is resizing. I haven't talked about that at all. That's because I'm going to move up here. I had that set as 1FR, and I think I might give this a min-max instead to be like 500 pixels, comma 1FR. So the maximum size is 1FR, but it can't shrink smaller than 500 just because I think it looks ugly. It's obviously not going to be fully responsive by doing this, but I think it's going to look better overall. And it'll probably make it easier to style a little bit too, just because I can side scroll if I need to and leave this big. Wish I'd thought that a little earlier, but that's okay. Let's move back up to my typography area. Actually, I realized I'm just going to take the logo thing here and move it down to here. Just so all the type stuff is together, I could comment this up just to organize it a little more, but first of all, my title, let's just do a line height 1 on that because the spacing there is way too big. Usually it would be all on one line anyway, but just in case, actually they should both get one of those. Much better. Okay, so my links, I want to stick with here, paragraph strong. I'll do it right here. My links color will be my var color 1, so they're white. Just because I don't want them to be transparent at all. They'll stand out a little bit more this way, just to make it that they have the underline, which already makes it look like a link, but they're a little bit brighter than the rest of the text too, which makes them a little bit easier to see. And I have my title. All of this sort of would be things that could be used anywhere, not necessarily inside other parts list as well. So I'm going to come down here and we'll do my button. Just because it doesn't really, this is obviously inside of this form, but in the big picture it could be used anywhere. And let's style up this button. So once again, I'm going to use the all on set here because buttons have lots of styles on them that we can get rid of them all in one shot. Except it didn't do it because if I come down to here, I did a button and I give it a class. Obviously, you don't have to give it a class in this case. I could target the button itself, but as I said, I like always targeting a bit of everything. I like always targeting classes instead of either elements or IDs. Just keeps things a bit easier to, you don't have to run into specificity. Or if you've been following any of my videos, that's a word I cannot say for the life of me. So now we can sort of just let's give it the cursor pointer. I'd recently had linked to a thing on Twitter saying that buttons don't need to have this. And Facundo, who's a frequent commenter, we exchange a lot on Twitter, and he's always in the comments, so hi Facundo. So he challenged that, and I sort of agree with him. I should have looked into it a bit more before I tweeted it, but yeah, clickable things online tend to always have the pointer, so we're going to put that on there. Let's give it a display. I'm going to give it inline block, so it can take up some size and have some padding and margins on there. So we want to give it a background of our color 5, that's my accent color. We'll give it some padding of 0.25 m, 1 m. It's a little bit small. We'll go with 0.5, 1.5. We could probably make it a little, this even maybe like a 0.75. I don't want to make it too long. Maybe it was a little too wide, the original one. I'm going to stick with that. My green is brighter here. The reason I went for a brighter green, already I sort of flip-flopped between white and black text when I was designing it and settled on the black. I think the white looked nicer, but the black had a higher contrast, and I did run it on a test to see if, for accessibility reasons, the color contrast, and it came up that with the white it was a little low, so I'm going with a brighter one and hoping that that means when I do a color of our color dark? No, I didn't come up with a color for this. Did I? Color... That's okay. Let's just, we won't use a variable for this one. RGBA 000.8, I guess. Font weight was var font weight 3. It looks pretty bold there. And this is probably like a 0.7. It's really annoying me that this whole thing's refreshing. I'm really sorry for that. There we go. So I think that looks not too bad. I want to give it a little bit of something on hover. So what I'm going to do, and actually I'm going to just break this for a second so it doesn't refresh the whole time I'm writing this. What I'm going to do is give this a transform scale of 1, transition scale, transition of transform, ease in, out, and we'll do it pretty fast. And then my button hover can get a transform scale 1.1 or something. I don't want it to be too big. And before I refresh everything, I want to go back up to my links because I didn't give them a hover, and we probably should. A hover color. We'll just go back to the original. We'll let it inherit from the text. Let's add my semicolon back here to fix it. And so my links just get a little basic hover like that, which is nothing too fancy, but it works. And that will just get a little bit bigger. Maybe it's too big. It's overlapping the text, but I do want to have a space here. So what I'm going to do for that space actually is a button plus anything. So anytime, this is not selecting the button, it's selecting anything that's after a button. So if anything, it could even be a second button. It could, anything that would be after a button. We'll get a margin left of 2M. Yeah, that looks pretty good actually. So now even if that grows, it's not overlapping anything. So it gives me a space on the left of any button. So that would be perfect. I definitely want, look, I mentioned it before, this is lining up like not exactly how I want it to be. So I think what I'm going to do for that was my fine print. I'm just trying to, I want to put a class on this that's going to let me, because I don't want to do it with my fine print because it's going to break this behavior and then I'd have to change this one, and that's kind of annoying. Maybe I'd actually use it on these labels too. So I'm going to, on this one, so this is my fine print, this paragraph here that has the checkbox in it. I'm going to add a second class of just flex center. It's a little bit of like a bootstrap style thing here, or more of an atomic thing where, let's do it after my button, I guess. After my logo, but before that. Flex center will be a display flex and a line items center. So you can see that's lining that up in the middle of my checkbox now, instead of it being lined up with the bottom, the text itself. So that's good. The only problem now is my checkbox is too close. Type, I'm going to also give this a class equals checkbox. And that can go in my form. I guess that should be, I did form on everything else, so this would be form checkbox. And form text, form checkbox. And that will get a margin left of 0.5em, margin right of 0.5em. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Perfect. I like that a lot. I think that's looking pretty good. So let's just take a look at what it's looking like. So the only thing that's really missing now are our little tooltips here. So how should we do those tooltips? I'm going to do a span. So let's go back up your email here. So I'm just going to, that's your email. And what we're going to do is right here, we're going to give ourselves the span. So let's put a space and then do a span. We'll give this a class of form tooltip and close span. So just to check that out, and we'll put a question mark right there. So there we go. We have our span inside of the label that has the question mark on it. So that's perfect. Now we want to hover it. So when we go on top, we get a little pop-up that will come up. So to do that, we're going to give ourselves form text. I'm going to do it right after my form text here. Let's do the form tooltip. And again, just to get that to stop flashing all the time. Oops. Let's just take this off because that'll break my CSS and stop it from compiling while I do my form tooltip here. So for the form tooltip, let's just make this look a little bit better. I'm going to give this a font size of our var font size small. And I'm going to give it a background of var color dark because I want it to sort of be about the same color as that. I need to see these, so we'll get that to load in. I'm going to give this actually a display of inline block because I want to give it a width of, I'll do 1em, height of 1em. And I'm actually going to make that 1 rem instead of 1em, just so it's matching. If not, it's a little bit smaller. The rem will go to 16 pixels, whereas this is at like 12. So that will be better. We'll give it a border radius of 50% to make it round. I want the question mark to actually be in the middle of that circle. So for that, I'm going to do a display of flex and a line items center and a justify. Actually, do I need that? I might just be able to do a text align center. I might have been complicating things more than we needed to. Actually, that looks pretty good. So I won't bother with the flex because that's exactly what I wanted, more or less. The only problem, I think, is that I'd want to move that whole thing up a little bit. On my form label, let's go back to there. I did display block. If I did a display flex instead, it moves that up, but then I can do align self center and then a margin left of like 1em, maybe half of that, 0.5. There we go. Cool, so that's good. So that's just this little thing here. So that's the span itself. But now when I hover on top of that, I want some stuff to happen. So when I hover, I'm going to use, if you haven't seen my video on pseudo-elements, the second video in that series covers what I'm about to do now. So I'm actually going to come on my span class tooltip here. Yeah. I'm going to come into here and I'm going to add a data tooltip. And we're going to do equals, please enter your email address right here. So what we can do with that, and the reason this is useful, is we can come down and say that my form tooltip after. Most of the time when you're using pseudo-elements, you might do, or most of the time I use them, I'm using them for decorative stuff. So I'm going to be using a content like this. But what I'm going to do this time instead is you can fill your after things with stuff. You can give stuff in here. And so here I can put data tooltip, and whatever you can see now, please enter your email address. So whatever value I've put in here, I can actually have that come out. You can have it show like the alt text of an image or other stuff too for captions, which can be useful. And now we can style this up a little bit. So again, I'm going to break that so it doesn't keep refreshing my styles, just because that flashing of the page reloading each time is driving me kind of bananas. And let's give this a display of block, I guess. And we're going to have to come up onto here and give this a position relative, because I'm going to want this to be position absolute, just so I can move it a little bit from where it is now. We'll give it a little bit of padding. I'll put 1em for now until I can see it, and we'll give it a background of the dark color. So var color dark, and let's go take a look at what this looks like. Okay, so I think we're getting there. I'm going to move it up so the bottom will become 0, I think. So we can even make the bottom like -1em. Oops, sorry, 1em. I'm trying to be a bit bigger, 1.25, 1.5. And we can give this a width. The width, just because it's the way the content is, and there's no paragraph or there's nothing, so it's going to automatically become the width of the longest word the way it is. So actually, I'm going to give this also a text align left, and the width will be, I don't know, 2, 3. We'll try 300 pixels. We'll see what it looks like. It's a little bit long right now, but I'm thinking for the password that might work. Maybe 250. There might be a way of getting it to match the length of the text, but honestly, I'm not sure how we can do that. So it's going to have to stay like that for now. So there we go. That's going to pop up like that. I want the text is a little bit hard to read, so I'm also going to change the color of my text to my color 1. So it's just pure white instead of being a little bit of a lower opacity. It's already a small enough font. Let's make it easier to read. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. But obviously we don't want it to always be there. So what we'll do is we'll change this to none. And then what we can say is on my form tooltip hover after display block. So now when I hover on top of my question mark, we get the tooltip showing up. So that's nice and handy. So we can add another one to that. So we don't even have to touch the CSS anymore. All we have to do is find our password. And this is where data tooltip, we could say something that's actually useful, not please enter your password, but it could be like minimum 12 characters, at least 1 capital and 1 number. I don't know, something like that. Forms that don't tell you the minimum requirements, it's just bad user experience. Did I put that on the wrong thing? I put that on the label itself. Whoops. That should have gone here. We need a span. Span class equals to form tooltip, and paste in that, close span, and put a question mark. There we go. Minimum 12 characters, at least 1 capital and 1 number. So yeah, places that don't tell you the minimum requirements or maximum. Sometimes like I use LastPass, so I can click this and generate a password. So I can go to more options. I'm usually going with like a big length just to make my life easier. It doesn't give me a warning until I hit sign up, and then it says, no, your password is too long. So for me, that's a pain, just because why didn't you tell me that somewhere at the beginning? So having things that warn you about issues from the very start can be handy. I don't think we need one on the re-enter password, so I'm not going to bother putting one there. But I think overall that's looking pretty good. This obviously is just an image, so it doesn't work right now, but everything else on here is working. I already have an account. My button is going there. The only thing I'd say right now is it looks nice, but I think we can make it a little bit more interesting. Actually, we need the gradient to come on here. So I'm going to do the gradient, and I'm going to actually put a background image on here. I took a screenshot from Steam's page to do that because I thought about it afterwards. So I don't actually have to change any of my markup. We're just going to come into here. Let's go find my front. So we already have a background color on this. Now, if I'd written this, if you're doing something like this and you just did background, you're going to have to switch it over to background color because we're going to want the color and we're going to want an image on this because I'm going to create my gradient. So instead of just having a background gradient and needing to know your color at the front and color at the bottom, what you can do is give a color, which is your base color, and then on top of that add in a background image, which will be our gradient. So let's just bring this a bit bigger and I'll focus on that. So it's gonna be a linear gradient, but the real trick here, the real trick here is going from an RGBA of 0, 0, 0, oops, I guess a double 0 would work, 0. So I'm coming from 100% transparent, and then I'm just going to go to red just so you can see what it's going to do. So it's keeping my background blue, but then the gradient, because it's a background image, it's a nice thing you can do with this. If you don't want to, have to figure out this color and then this color. The reason that it works in this case is because now I can use my var color dark as my secondary color, and it's just going to go from a light color into the darker color. So this is like a 25% black down there. So even if I just did like RGBA down to 000.25, it makes a light to a dark gradient. And you could do the same thing if you're going like 255, 255, 255 to give yourself a white, but just don't go to 100% white. Go to like a 20%, 30% white, and it'll give you a little subtle gradient based on your background color. And we could also add in to bottom right. So it's going to start here and just go at the angle just like I did in the original design there. So one cool way you can do that to add some gradients into your stuff. And at the same time, let's go up to my body. And on here, we're going to add, I want to do it with my background color. Background color's there. So I'm going to add a background image URL, and this is another one that I've uploaded to Steam, so I just have it off screen here, the actual URL for it. One second. So we'll paste that in there and we'll see the image come in. So on that, I'm also going to add a background size of cover. But in this case, I don't want just this image of the game in the background here. I want it to blend in with the blue that I had. So under that, we'll add a background blend mode. I'm going to try multiply, which is always my first go-to for getting dark colors to come through. And actually that worked out really well. So it just adds a little bit of like a texture, some interest, but it's not distracting. I'm still focused on what I should be focused on. But I just think it looks a little bit nicer that way. So there's the finished result. I think it's a big improvement over the original one. I hope you agree. And I hope you learned a few fun things along with this video.
Awesome. So that was a lot of fun. It was an interesting one for me. I'm glad I actually pulled off my challenge. I really enjoyed that. If you have any suggestions for other things you'd like to see me design and code, I'd love to see them down in the comments below. Just again, try and keep it to smaller components, things that I could pull off in one video. I know for a fact I'm going to get like 25 comments about doing a carousel. One of these days, maybe I'll get around to doing that. I know it's a popular topic. If you want to voice that down below, go ahead as well. But if you have any other ideas, I would love to hear them. Otherwise, we're all wrapped up here. So a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. If you don't know about Patreon, it's a place where people can support creators who make valuable stuff. Even if you go over there, I am trying to post on a weekly basis for free over there, so you can always go and check that out just to see it, sort of a behind-the-scenes update on how this channel is doing, sort of, as well as there is the premium content available there as well, that I'm trying to be a little bit more active with. Also, if you don't know about it, I have a newsletter slash articles thing, so that's weekly delivered to your inbox, or you can just go and check out my site. The link for that is down below, where, just like here, I talk about fun CSS and designy type stuff. You can always find me on social media, mostly on Twitter, but I do have an Instagram as well. I think that's all, so until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.